reflection in your eyes. I see the reflection in your eyes. I see the reflection in your eyes. It's not just what you did, it's what you do. Not just how you move, it's how you move it. It's not just what you gave, it's what you're giving. Not just after life, it's how you live. Breathing through us now. It's never too late, you're never too far gone for grace to find you where you are. Resurrection, it's never too late. Hope can't be buried or contained. You raise us from the grave. Resurrection, it's not just that one stone, it's stones still rolling, not only shedding your grave clothes, it's our unfolding. Oh, not just one death to life, oh, it's resurrecting. Oh, all that we've lost, it's never too late, you're never too far gone for grace to find you where you are. Resurrection, it's never too late. Hope can't be buried or contained. You raise us from the grave. Resurrection, you say it's never too late. 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 You raise us, you raise us, you raise us from our graves. You raise us, you raise us, you raise us from our graves. You raise us, you raise us, you raise us from our graves. You raise us, you raise us, you raise us from our graves. You raise us, you raise us, you raise us from our graves. You raise us, you raise us, you raise us from our graves. You raise us, you raise us, you raise us from our graves. You raise us, you raise us, you raise us from our graves. It's never too late, you're never too far gone for grace to find you where you are. It's resurrection, it's never too late. Hope can't be buried or contained. You raise us from our grave. You say it's never too late. You raise us from our graves. You raise us, you raise us, you raise us from our graves. You raise us, you raise us, you raise us from our graves. You raise us, you raise us, you raise us from our graves.
Good morning. Welcome to Watershed on this wonderful day where we all lose an hour of sleep collectively and can all feel for one another. So we're glad that you are here, whether you are here in person or logging on Facebook or YouTube. I want to give you a second to connect, maybe say hi to a few people in the online space. Maybe tell us where you're logging in from and how much coffee you've had this morning. If you're here in person, we'd love to have you stand and begin this morning by us singing together.
Night turns to morning. You have been waiting, whispering to me. Gently I'm waking. It's the dawn of a new day. You've painted for me. Colors exploding, telling our story. I'm waking up, I'm waking up. I'm waking up, I'm waking up. Night turns to morning. You have been waiting, whispering to me. Gently I'm waking. It's the dawn of a new day. You've painted for me. Colors exploding, telling our story. I'm waking up, I'm waking up. I'm waking up, I'm waking up. Oh, I'm waking up, I'm waking up. I'm waking up, I'm waking up. I can feel the rising of the sun. Mercy saves me, the promise of your love. I'm reminded of how far we've come. You're the one that my heart's beating for. I can feel the rising of the sun. Mercy saves me, the promise of your love. And I'm reminded of how far we've come. You're the one that my heart's beating for. I can feel the rising of the sun. Mercy saves me, the promise of your love. And I'm reminded of how far we've come. You're the one that my heart's beating for. I can feel the rising of the sun. Mercy saves me, the promise of your love. I'm reminded of how far we've come.
heart is beating for. My heart is beating for. I'm waking up, I'm waking up. 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 As we begin this morning, and again, we're probably all a little tired, maybe lost an hour of sleep. There's this place that we can be in where this time change and maybe this season in life is happening to us. It feels like we're out of control. It feels like things are putting us in a space where we're reactive. Maybe where we don't have time to catch a breath. I was talking with a friend last night who was talking about this reframing of maybe that we get to do this. We get to be here. We get to sing. We get to take a breath. And so maybe this morning as we're walking in, a little extra coffee, a little less sleep, maybe we reframe the space that we're in today. Reframe the moments ahead. That we get to be here. We get to be alive. We get to pause. We get to take a breath. So I want to thank you for being here, for engaging this room, for filling it up with your voices. I want to create a little space for you in the next few moments to maybe say hi or just connect with someone near you. It could just be a look. Maybe it's a smile with your eyes a little bit. But then we'll continue singing together.
This is probably my favorite time of the morning when I get to see people interacting with each other. That in and of itself is a spiritual practice. And so when we get to be with one another, something special happens. And so I'm really happy that all of you are here. Really grateful for those online. It's good to be with you. So earlier this week, I was in Phoenix, Arizona on a rest retreat, and I looked at my phone to see what songs we were singing because I knew it'd be on today, and I saw this song and my heart sank just a little bit. We've sung it before. It's called Alpha and Omega, and I was just kind of curious, how would I connect to this song? And one of the days that I was there, I was trying to put on this necklace, and it slipped out of my hand, and it broke, and it shattered into pieces. And I thought, this is such a great metaphor for the last couple of years, for this season of life that we're in. It just feels like we're broken pieces. And then when I think about Alpha and Omega, this is found in Revelation, but it's also found in the Old Testament. In Jewish traditions, God was referenced as the first and the last. Alpha and Omega is the beginning and the end. And I just thought about those broken pieces, and sometimes I recognize that I'm just not enough for myself. I need something outside of me. And we have this promise of the Alpha and the Omega. And wherever you are in your spiritual journey, sometimes this notion of worship is really triggering. But then I think about how my faith has shifted over the years, and this imago Dei, being created in God's image, being created in the Alpha and the Omega's image. That even though we are these broken pieces, we're held together and we're invited into this reverence, this awe. And so I just invite you to keep an open posture as we sing this song. If you want to sit, if you want to stretch your hands out, however this comes over you, may it meet the broken pieces in your life today. Will you sing that with me again? You are Alpha. And you are Alpha and Omega. We worship you, our Lord. You are worthy to be praised.
God, as we come to this space, we come with joy in our hearts. We come with pain and grief and sorrow. And God, we know that you hold all of this together. This idea of Alpha and Omega includes everything. So all the parts of us are welcome. All the parts of us belong. And may these next few moments be filled with you. May our awareness of you and our heart be open to you. We love you. Amen. You can be seated.
Hey, Watershed family. My name is Kim Honeycutt, and this coming Saturday, March 19th, I have the privilege of partnering with Tommy and Miko for us to bring you a really special workshop about connecting to your body, your mind, and your spirit. And I, as a psychotherapist, get to talk to you about your mind. We're going to talk about neuroscience, about your attachment style as a kid, and how that relates to that inner critical voice. You know the one I'm talking about. So we're going to deconstruct that. And not deconstruct in the way that got you at Watershed Church in the first place, not that. But in a way that you can reconstruct a little bit more and connect to your essence. So join me this coming Saturday, March 19th.
Hey Watershed, it's Tommy. I'm really excited to be with you for this Kindred retreat, and so just wanted to let you know that as we're working to reconnect our minds, our bodies, and our hearts together, I'm going to be using some of my nursing expertise to do some embodiment exercises with us called emergent improvisation. I learned this from a dear friend and comrade in the struggle for liberation, about just getting in touch with our bodies and the bodies around us and how that affects us. So I'm really excited to tie this into Kim and Miko's offering, and to have a really embodied experience with you. See you soon.
Hi Watershed, I'm Miko, and I'll be guiding the Connecting to Spirit portion of our upcoming Body, Mind, and Spirit retreat. In the final session of the day, we'll do meditation and other practices from the Christian contemplative tradition to first ground us in the reality that God is always already grounded in us and everyone else and everything around us, and to secondly, explore how to stay connected to the reality of the oneness of our life with God, the lives of others, and everything around us. Everyone is welcome to attend, and by everyone, I mean all y'all. The retreat is designed by queer folks with queer and questioning folks in mind, but allies are encouraged to join us, and we'll definitely get a lot out of it. So see you next Saturday at 9 a.m. right here at Watershed.
Matt, I'm one of the co-pastors here at Watershed, and you know somebody's serious in the South when they say y'all, all right? So just want to reiterate, this is going to be an incredible event. What might be worth mentioning is that this event is also partnering with something called ICU Talks. You can learn more about ICU Talks at icutalks.org, but that's a mental health ministry that Kim Honeycutt actually founded several years ago and does some really powerful work here in Charlotte as well. So go ahead and you can, if you want to be a part of that, you can use the QR code there, or at the Watershed app, there's a place to sign up via the Sunday News tab or on the Watershed app as well. Also, wanted to let you know of a few other things that might be interesting in terms of connecting here. Yoga, Watershed Yoga starts tomorrow night. I believe it's at 7 p.m. There's a QR code for this as well. And the way we're asking people to participate in this is, first of all, you can just show up. You don't have to register anything. It's helpful if you register because that gives Lauren Moore, who runs that, who leads that, or facilitates that experience, gives her some idea of what sort of crowd she's going to be having. But if you just want to show up, that's fine too, and that's by just sort of donations, whatever you think is helpful for Lauren, then we let you kind of figure that out. And then also, April 3rd is the next time we do a baby dedication. So if you're a parent with a new infant, new child, and you want to participate in this, again, there's a QR code. Blair Gore, who kind of oversees that part of what we do here, will connect with you and start to make you aware of the details surrounding what that all means. Again, that's April the 3rd. And then I also want to just take a moment, excuse me, and we've had a few folks that have reached out to us and said, hey, can you just take a moment and clarify like where Watershed sits in terms of some of the mask movement culturally and socially in Charlotte and the world? I know that the CDC and CMS has started to make some adjustments and talk about masking in a different way. And that's all fine and good, but we continue to mask here at Watershed. Nothing's really changed. And the reason we do that is because we have siblings. We have Watershed siblings, people that are family and friends that they might have some comorbidities around, maybe they can't get the vaccine or maybe they have some health issues. And they really feel safe, and they're better protected when we show up masked. And so in the name of being in solidarity with our siblings, we continue to mask. And we just want to make you aware of that we're continuing to talk about this. If something were to change, we'll make you aware of that as well. But just a huge thank you to our Watershed community who continues to hold that space well here and do so in a way so that it works for everyone. So I just want to make sure that you had the chance to hear that. And then also, we continue to be so grateful for the way so many of you show up here with your resources, and the way that each week more and more of you are continuing to help out in terms of how resources fund and fuel the work that we get to do here. In the weeks ahead, you're going to hear more about some of the partnerships that we've taken on just since the beginning of the year. We're trying to button up all the different details so that we can present those in a way that's really powerful and allows you to be be able to access those moving forward. But again, the $11,000 or $12,000 per week that it takes to fuel Watershed, we're just so grateful that in the new year that's continued to come through in a really, really healthy way. So part of why that's become healthy is because each month we've seen new folks jump on board and say, I want to be a part of this in a recurring fashion. And so every month we have this goal of trying to see 5 brand new Watershed givers begin giving at least $100 or more a month in a recurring fashion. And according to where we are this month, we're still about 4 away. So we got 3 or 4 more weekends to be able to achieve that goal. I want to make you aware of that. But again, thank you for all that you're doing. You can there's several different ways that you can give here at Watershed. You can obviously there's a QR code, but then also on our app and our website, there's secure ways to give. Either through credit card or check or whatnot. So I want to make you aware of that. And then lastly, for I guess about the last 2 or 3 years, we've had this sort of standing moment or standing interruption within actually it's just part of the flow of a Sunday morning where our own Watershed community would participate in something called What's Saving You Now? And in March, we've adjusted that to say, who's serving you right now? And we've invited some of our Watershed community to introduce themselves to you and let you know this is an area that they participate in and they give of themselves in, and how that's been meaningful for their life. And as a matter of fact, I think Aiden's here this morning. Will you give Aiden, my friend Aiden, a big round of applause as he comes this morning?
Okay, so I have not been on a stage in like 2 years, so I'm very nervous right now. So I figured if I just say that out there, then I'll be a little less nervous. But really great setup with that on who's serving you right now. A little bit about me. I've only been in Charlotte for a little over a year now. Moved here during the pandemic and trying to find a community to be connected to. And a lot of people like me found Watershed just by like Googling Progressive Church Charlotte, and that's how I ended up here. But being here, it felt like the right place to be for a lot of reasons. My own background, my own kind of values as it came to social justice and inclusion, and where I felt like I sat in the world. And so after being here for only a little bit, I had served in kind of like production stuff at church before. I've served in like band before, and I realized I was like, hey, I really want to get to know people. I really want to feel connected to my community. I want to do something that I enjoy. So I want to do this. I want to do this at Watershed. And so I was able to jump in with like tech and production, and Desmond really kind of helped guide me through that. And it wasn't too long into like being here that like Desmond was like, hey, actually, you know, I'm looking to go with my wife back to Canada so we can like visit family. I need someone to fill in for me for 3 weeks. He's like, I noticed that like you seem to know a lot of things about a little different stuff here and there. Do you think you could fill in for me? And I was like, yeah, sure, I could. I was very nervous about it, but I was like, sure, I'll help out. Kind of jumping into that. And it kind of went okay. There was definitely lots of mistakes here and there, and I was like, oh my gosh, they are never going to invite me back. This is so bad. Like, I was so nervous about it. But I actually remember, I don't think Austin knew I was going to talk about him, but I remember him giving me some encouragement back in the booth there and saying that, hey, what's going on Sundays, you know, it's not a show. It's not this concert that we're doing. We're here to connect as a community. And mistakes are okay. You know, one, there's so much of a community that's being built among Watershed outside of this Sunday morning, outside through the different groups we have, the different connections that people are making. But also, a mistake is not the be-all, end-all. We all have that we're doing in life. It doesn't matter. It's okay. And so I was like, ooh, okay, like I feel good. They don't hate me. It's fine. And I think that's kind of my encouragement for anyone who might be interested in volunteering with tech or anything else at Watershed is that you do not have to be perfect. You do not have to be an expert. You do not have to wait until you feel like you're ready to join it. I very much did not feel like I was ready, but I found that it was a great experience. And so if you are in a boat where you feel like I was, where you're wanting to connect to people, or if you feel like you're wanting to build up that community you're part of, or if you're just looking to kind of grow within Watershed, then that's what I'd invite you to do. You can wait years and years and years until you think you're ready, but I'd say if you are interested in that or you're in that boat, you know, if that's tech or if that's greenhouse or anything else like that, find someone and be able to say, hey, I want to get involved, I want to get connected, what can I do? And so that's kind of my encouragement to everyone. That's kind of my experience and my story. So thank you so much for letting me share with you today. I'm going to pass it back on to the band.
walk with me. All along my pilgrim journey, Lord, I want Jesus to walk with me.
pastors here, and it's good to be with you. Somebody said the other day, there's so many voices on different Sundays that we don't know who people are, and probably we should maybe put our names up or whatever it is. But I think the idea of a plethora of voices has been really meaningful for us in the last couple of years. For the longest time, it was just one or two of us, maybe three of us randomly. But now to have such a variety of different people speaking at different times, and if you show up every other week, you might miss out on different people. So anyways, it's really good to be with you. And again, my name is Scott, and I look forward to getting to meet some of you and know some of you who are relatively new to this community. I sat in Preface the other night. There was, I don't know, maybe 18 or 20 of us, and to sit in that space and to hear the journeys of where many of you are in your faith and experience, and it's incredibly meaningful. So thank you for being a part of what's going on here. I'm really excited about the days ahead. So I have a friend of mine, a couple, who moved to the Carolinas a few years back. And the wife told the husband, here's the deal. I feel like God is telling us to move out of New York and go to North Carolina. And so they were in a place where they were retired and they had the ability to do that. And so months later, they ended up here in the Raleigh, North Carolina area. About a year later, they realized, or she in particular realized, that she wasn't making the connections that she had hoped she would make. And after 70 years of being in New York and then moving here and not quite being the same, felt like maybe they needed to go back to New York. And I remember my friend saying to his wife, but I thought God told you you were supposed to be here in the Carolinas. And this narrative that many of us have come from or come out of, or maybe we still live with, that says, well, what does it mean to have God speak into our lives? What does it mean for us to have something happen that somehow we assign sort of deity organizing? Is that something that's even realistic? Does God even speak into our situations and our circumstances? Does God control those realities? And I have to admit, obviously, I don't know. Obviously, it's speculation to say everything I just said. But I think it's at least worthy of the conversation to say, well, if I look at my life, and I imagine if you do the same in your reality, and look over the decades with which you have existed, you might be able to say, well, there are certain things that I can look at over my life anyways, and see that there's things that have happened that are bigger than myself, that are beyond me being able to orchestrate or plan or to network or to educate. I can think back into my late teens when I got my first sort of quote-unquote ministry job, working with a nonprofit, and how that emerged unbeknownst to anything that I was really doing. I remember my first gig in a church. I never thought it would be wanted by a church, let alone that would be an area of expertise or area I would want to grow into. And a friend of mine called me up and he said, hey, you want to join our staff? And the sort of my professional reality was happening in such a way that was realistic. And so I moved and started the whole idea of being a pastor. I remember Matt and Donna coming to visit Taryn and I when we were on staff at this church in Michigan and saying, hey, we're thinking about starting a church and maybe working together. We really don't know how to do anything else, so maybe we can start a church, and what do you think about doing that? And maybe let's go to Charlotte. And 18 months later, we started Watershed. And I look at all these experiences that we've been through, and I would be remiss, I think, to make the assumption that there wasn't something impacting those decisions, bigger than ourselves, something outside of myself. And I know maybe about a year ago or so, many of you threw out a bunch of questions our way. It was really interesting questions. This is maybe 30 or 40 questions. And we've attempted to try to get after them over the last year or so in some of our talks, and in particular in this series. And the overarching maybe narrative of those questions, to me anyways, as I was looking at them, sort of rooted in this idea is what is God doing in my life? What kind of strings is he pulling? Are they managing my decisions? And you were asking questions like, well, why am I single? What's that mean? And what do I do with my singleness? And the sort of the underlying question is, well, maybe God is allowing me to be single or not allowing me to be single. So what do I do with that? Or during COVID, my marriage and my relationship, my partnership, it went sideways and didn't work. What's happening in all of that? And you were sort of asking this underlying question of, well, who's navigating and who's managing all that is going on? Is there something else besides just me and myself? I mean, I want kids after all, but it's not happening like I thought it was going to happen. And so again, the implication is, well, maybe this God thing isn't working like I thought it was supposed to work, and maybe she was supposed to provide kids for me but didn't. And you have all these questions that you begin to ask because you're questioning the role that deity plays in your life. And that's the legitimate question. And I think we have to maybe ask the question, what do we even mean by the idea of control? Well, if I can look at God in terms of a continuum, and the role that he plays or she plays in our lives. There's this idea of, full-on puppet master. You are the puppet, and God's pulling the strings and making every decision for you. God has complete control over every decision you make. And there are groups of faith and of Christianity in particular that hold to that very strongly. And there's the other side of the continuum that says, God is not involved in any of our decision-making. We are completely on our own, and we make our own choices. And so this has been a lot of debate and tension within the church over the years. And part of what we get to do here at Watershed is not necessarily tell you how to believe, but maybe give you grids and filters and containers with which you then say, well, you know what? I have something now that I can add to how I interpret my experience with faith. how I interpret my encounters with God, how I interpret my relationships here in this space. And so I was, years ago, in 1989, it was the tail end of the Soviet Union, I spent some time there. Then throughout the 90s, spent a ton of time in Russia. I spent some time in Ukraine, in Kyiv. And watching the church there and the way they take their faith so seriously and how passionate they are for their connection with God and tradition, it's quite beautiful and quite elegant. And so, of course, this whole thing going on with Russia and Ukraine and all of the nuances and all the pain that is seemingly happening there. I remember maybe 3 or 4 weeks ago now, before Russia invaded, Taryn showed me a picture online of Russian Christians in particular who were praying and begging God not to have the invasion happen. Well, we know, of course, the invasion did happen. And what does that do to one's psyche? Because if you ask the questions, I think honestly, is God orchestrating that? Does God not care? What do we do with it? I think it's incredibly complex when we start asking those kinds of questions, but I think those are legitimate. Because if we claim some sense of a deity, some sense of an essence out there, I think it is absolutely imperative to attempt to understand how is it that we connect with that essence, with that deity, with God. And what kind of role does she play in our lives? What kind of role might we play in their life as well? So maybe the idea of a control versus free will is a continuum that is just too binary. Maybe there's a third or a fourth or a fifth or a sixth way in which we can attempt to get at how we understand or how we connect with God themselves. So I would like to, if I could, again, give you a container this morning, something that might be a grid with which you might find some energy that would inform how that looks for you. And maybe some of you already have these built out for yourself, but let me speak into that if I may. For the record, I personally like a God that controls things because it makes me feel safe. It makes me feel as though, well, somebody who is a lot smarter than myself, who seemingly knows reality better than I do, they're in control. I really like that. And I remember it was about 8 or 9 years ago, and part of my deconstruction, the hardest, most difficult part of it for me wasn't my theological nuances and what I thought about God or didn't think about God, but it was the role that I understood God to play in my life. It shifted. And it felt, if I could be honest, kind of lonely. It felt painful because I didn't see God sort of pulling the strings like I thought maybe they were pulling over the years. And so I liked the idea of a God in control. So I had to really, it took me a lot of years in my own mind and my own psyche to understand maybe the grid in the way in which I encounter God and the way God might encounter myself. And the metaphor that serves best for me, and this is the parenting metaphor. Because after all, what is it we are supposed to do as parents or caretakers? In a perfect situation, you create, you invest, you pour into these children, and then you set them loose, and hopefully they thrive. Invariably, they make their own decisions. They make good decisions, bad decisions, and they learn on their own. But part of parenting is helping your child thrive. And maybe this experience with God is a similar situation where she created us. And in that creation, sending us out and giving us choices and opportunities to maybe make some decisions, messing up on our own right and hopefully learning in that space. What I'd like to do is, if I could, just for a second here, push pause and kind of go down a different lane. It's going to come together here in just a moment, but I want to push pause for just 1 second. And I want to attempt, this is all speculation, because that's all we can do is speak into an idea, right? I want to attempt to put some definition to the idea of God. And we'll come back to this in terms of what role that deity then plays in our lives. So I think it's very important to understand that God is an emotive creature, essence, deity, reality. If you hold to a Jewish or Christian tradition, then you'll see throughout the scriptures that the writers and the authors of the Bible have a very, very strong sense that God is deeply emotive. I mean, you look at it in Genesis 1, where God sees that he created the world and it was good in his take. And other times it was actually really good, he says. This sense that I like something, but I really, really like something. There's energy behind it. There's a sense of gratefulness and joy. We see a few chapters later in Genesis 6 where the Lord was sorry that he made humans and grieved in his heart. She felt the sense of their creation sort of going against them. In Exodus 3, God hears the cries of Israel and is concerned about their suffering. Imagine a deity that cares. And for the record, this was a relatively new notion in human development. Up to this point, for the most part, gods were seen as creators of their minions, and their minions were to serve at the pleasure of the god. And this is the first time in human development that we saw the idea of a God created, or a God coming into the human consciousness, and humanity was also a recipient of God's love. A complete different concept in terms of how one saw divinity. We see in Exodus 20 where God self-identifies as a jealous God with unswerving loyalty. It's a deeply passionate narrative of how one might interpret God. That God encounters a stiff-necked people and has anger that burns but relents and does not bring disaster. We see this in Exodus 32. This might be one of my favorite stories in the scriptures because it shows the deep connection that God has with humanity. And you maybe remember this story. This is where Moses is coming down off the mountain. He's got the 10 Commandments, right? You've seen the shows. He's coming down off the mountain, got the 10 Commandments, and he looks out and he sees Israel worshiping a golden calf and becomes angry because they're worshiping something else besides God themselves and throws the 10 Commandments down on the ground. And both God and Moses are having this dialogue as they're encroaching upon Israel. And God also becomes frustrated and becomes angry and wants to destroy and wipe out Israel, the text says. And Moses realizes, oh my goodness, this isn't good. So he then has dialogue with God and literally changes God's mind. The text says, and God relents and chooses not to kill the people. The idea that humankind has the ability to exchange and dialogue and interact with God and literally change the way and the outcome with which God was going to operate. There's something quite elegant and beautiful about that. We see where God's a jealous God and has pity on his people in Joel 2. God has compassion for Israel in Hosea. We see the Apostle Paul saying, don't grieve the Holy Spirit of God, which implies that our actions can somehow sadden God. So maybe you sit here this morning and you say, well, Scott, that's all great and good and everything, but at the end of the day, that's the Bible, and the Bible's fine, and it's meaningful to some people, but maybe it's not really that meaningful to me. I don't really buy it fully. And after all, the Bible is not a book of history, right? It's a book written by 40-some different authors over 1,800 years of time who were each of them were attempting to put off a narrative and had an agenda, and they would bend truth in terms of history to promote their agenda. So to call the Bible a history book is not helpful, and to call the Bible a book that somehow proves God's existence is also not helpful. These were assumptions that were already sort of baked into the Scriptures. So if you don't adhere to the Scriptures as being somehow a truthful text, which is fine, then maybe we can assume that God or essence or a deity or the Christ or whatever is behind all that is, which I'm making an assumption that you might even believe that there's something out there, there's some kind of intelligence that has formed all that is. If you believe that there's something out there that's formed all that is, whether it's through Big Bang or whatever it might be, is it not possible to look at that and say, that essence, that creator, deeply values beauty and creativity and a sense of love? And I can look at a flower and see the nuance and the detail. I can look at the snowflake and realize that they're all so different and unique. And that wasn't necessary for existence to happen, but it was as though God went the extra mile, that this deity went the extra distance to make something beautiful because beauty itself mattered, which might imply a sense of emotion, a sense of heart, a sense of care, a sense of value. a sense of love. And so maybe you don't buy the scriptures, but maybe through this lens of the sense that we look at all that is still worthy of this pursuit that God might be an emotive creator and creature. Is it possible to also assume, I'm again trying to build out some nuances about God here, that God experiences change? For much of our Christian tradition, for the last 1,500 years or so, the assumption has been God does not change, but the creation, we change. God stays the same and we change. But what if this isn't fully true? Have you ever had a really productive day and you find it's going really well? Maybe you got up that morning, had some time with some people that are meaningful to you, you got some work done, the day, you could just tell it was going really well. It was 1 o'clock, and like you were going to end the day well. And 1 o'clock happens, and the phone rings, and this happened to me just a few months ago, and it threw the whole day off. I knew that I had some relational encounter I was going to have to navigate. It was not fun. It was going to be painful. And instead of it being this good day, automatically, instantly, in that moment, I went from feeling something good to feeling frustration, to feeling pain, and maybe even a little bit of anger. And this is possible. This is how God also engages us. And we see this definitely in the Christian tradition. Where God makes changes, emotional changes. 1 minute seemingly doing fine, the next minute now he's angry. There's a sense that God in his emotions makes shifts, makes changes. Because what we do know, emotions cause a pivot. That you might have one emotion in one moment, but the next moment that emotion forces you to change how you are encountering that experience or that reality. And we see this also playing out with God. That can God change? Can God experience change himself? And can we actually bring this change on? I think is a really profound narrative. So I don't know how many of you like to read stuff like in the quantum physics space. I am not a scientist, and I am not good in that space, but I'm fascinated with this relatively new idea in the last 20, 30 years that we have an awareness of the space of quantum physics. And what the quantum physics space says, it's basically the subatomic space that you can only see with like really good technology and all the right visual stuff. What happens, and what they found in the labs were the scientists were coming up to these petri dishes of cells. And at the subatomic level, below protons and neutrons, like they call them quarks, and all these different little, very small, hard-to-see variables, that when the researcher in the lab would engage that pile of cells, that at the subatomic level, there was movement, there was things that were happening that were unique to each of the researchers that would show up to the table. Then the other colleague would show up, and that cell would respond differently to that colleague. Then somebody else would show up and would respond differently. And what they also found was that the cells in the humans were responding differently to what was also in front of them in the petri dish. The idea that creation engages itself, that it responds to itself, it impacts itself. So might it be possible that if we can walk into a space and at a molecular, cellular level, literally alter each other, is it not possible the same thing happens with deity? So what we know is this. At a molecular level, you are almost 100% energy. You're not physical. You're not water. You're almost 100% energy the more we break down who we are. It's mostly understood that God is energy, right? That's the idea of the Christ. That's the idea of spirit. So to think that we are mostly energy, that spirit is mostly energy, and so when we engage each other, that there's connection happening, there's something going on, that when we speak truth, when we pray, when we stop and attempt to listen, we're engaging energy. We see this happen at a very human level. When you walk into a room, And maybe you're just started dating, right? And you show up and you're both meeting at the restaurant, and when you walk in, it's like all of a sudden there's this love of your life, and the energy of the room is completely different. Then when you walk into your manager's office and he wears you out, right? There's that. So the chemistry at a molecular level literally is being altered in a relational way. What if this sense that we not only do this with each other, but we also do this with God as God is with us? That it's much more of an exchange than it is somehow there's some deity out there of which is pulling strings or controlling reality. Now, for some, they might say, well, you're actually robbing me of this idea that God is a strong God, that God is somehow powerful, because you're saying that, well, apparently God isn't as powerful anymore because now we can change God, we alter God. God is so like weak that literally their emotions change by how we engage them. Well, I think there is some truth to that, but I'm not so sure that makes them weak, right? Because when somebody or something has power and that person or that experience holds that power back, that to me is strength. That when you have the ability to be something but you restrain, that's powerful. Is it possible this is what God does with us? Jürgen Moltmann is a current theologian that probably has spoken the most into this in our modern day. And he argues that Jesus' death on the cross points to God's accessibility. And again, I think the story of the creation or of the crucifixion narrative is incredibly profound in terms of accessibility to God. In Jesus, God identifies with the godless and God-forsaken. The cross reveals that suffering is internal to Trinitarian life, says Moltmann. The crucified God shares in the suffering of the world and thereby shows solidarity with those who suffer. In short, Jesus' suffering on the cross reveals that God suffers. So, God has created us. Some essence, some form of reality has brought us into existence. And it seems apparent that deity, that God cares about their creation, has made each of us unique, has made this creation beautiful and elegant and unique, colorful and beautiful to look at and beautiful to watch with all its imperfections. And he maybe engages us like a parent would. He kind of releases us, that hoping that we would make some of the best circumstances and best decisions, knowing that doesn't always take place, doesn't always happen. But he's engaging us in that journey. He's engaging us in that process. And maybe it's not about God who's pulling strings or doesn't have any involvement. Maybe it's more about he or she are in it with us, that they're jumping into the process with us. Because parenting, as I understand it, I have a 17 and a 14-year-old, and I think there will be a day that they won't live with me. And when that happens, I still imagine that we will long to have influence in their lives. I watch my parents watch us parent, and they bite their lip all the time. That's what parents do, right? Or grandparents in particular. And so I think this sense that we get to experience God as one who has sent us out. Now, hang with me here on this a second. So maybe in it, God is joining us. That's kind of the crux of it, that we get to be in this together with God. But it still raises some questions. Like, why do bad things happen? Why do bad things happen to good people, right? It's sort of the typical question that we've often asked over the years. And is God doing those bad things? Is God allowing the Russians to go into Ukraine? Is that kind of tragedy something that somehow God is doing? I don't think God is somehow doing that or allowing that. I mean, after all, God created us. God created the universe. And maybe all that God has done in their creation is turn it loose. Maybe this is a little bit more of a metaphor that's a little bit more accessible. So a heavy rainstorm to somebody in the Midwest whose crops desperately need the rain is a blessing. That's a win. That's success. That same rainstorm can create a mudslide that wipes out a home. That's not a win. So is it possible that God has created and breathed reality into existence. And that reality has laws and rules to it. But instead of God controlling it all, he's pushed it into existence. They've pushed it into existence, and we get to live with it and in it. So God is not about trying to manage things or manage us. Maybe she is about pushing into reality this beautiful existence called the universe, which has responses when bad people take control and use their power to meet their own needs. People hurt and people die from that. Does that mean God orchestrated that, or does that mean God has pushed humankind into existence and has given them some freedoms? Has put them out there as a parent would and said, I'm going to do my best to set you loose within a system that I create, and we choose to take advantage of it to help each other or to hurt each other at times. And so these days, I find myself sometimes longing for a God that could control everything. Sometimes longing for a God that could sort of set me up and just take care of everything and do all the hard work and take away the fear and the concern. And then there's the other side of it that says, you know what, I'm grateful that I found a God that doesn't turn me loose to do my own thing as much as says, I'm in it with you. I know what it's like to feel. I know what it's like to hurt. I know what it's like to have dreams and those go away. I know what it's like to create something and that something doesn't want you back. I know what it's like to love. I know what it's like to be loved and to lose that love. I know what it's like to want something so badly and it doesn't happen. I know what it's like to long for a certain system to be a certain way and it seems like it never will be realized. The idea that God has created us, he longs to connect with us, longs to be in it with us. That's a grid that I never had for the first 40 years of my existence. Most of my life is about a God who controlled things, but maybe the older I get into this, and I'm not even trying to make it complicated or sophisticated, it's just that there is a God out there. There's something out there that's created all that is, and the beauty behind it matters to that essence. The small nuance, the small detail matters. And that's the kind of essence, that's the kind of God, I think, in our progressive theology, in our space here at Watershed, that we get to play with. And some of you come still with this narrative that says God is controlling all these things. Great, you're welcome. Some of you are in this process that God has nothing to do with anything I do. That's just it's metaphor for which you guys see reality. That's great, you're welcome in the space. But many of us are going to sit here and say, when you go through pain, we're in it together. And God sits in it with us. That God longs to engage his creation and maybe not always try to fix everything, but try to be in it with us. Because again, parents, we can't fix it, right? Sometimes we just have to be there for our kids, for these young people that we brought into this world. So maybe the question is not, is God in control? But maybe the question these days, is God involved? Is God a part of what's happening in your reality? Are you opening up to that reality being more present? Maybe that's conversion, right? Maybe that's saving. Maybe that's gospel. Maybe that's what Jesus was sort of inviting humankind into a couple thousand years ago, that it's this connection. With all the variables that don't make sense, with all the nuances that are not buttoned up, with so many questions that we still have so few answers to, what's a sense of engagement? And so this morning, this COVID, this pandemic, this reality with which you're in, maybe I can say with some sense of certainty that God is in this with us. I know this has been hard. We've got several relationships here, marriages, partnerships that have gone sideways. We have a lot of people here that have been through a lot of pain, lost loved ones to COVID, right? That this whole season has been very, very difficult. You've lost a job. You've dealt with massive loneliness, depression. In this, is it possible to say that God is in it with us? That God mourns and feels pain and hurt when we feel pain and when we feel hurt. So this morning, God, we're grateful that you sort of maybe invite us into this exchange, into this connection. Maybe this morning you just sort of bring a blanket of calm to this community of people who take you seriously. Maybe we don't take ourselves as seriously as we need to at times, and that's okay too. But we are attempting to figure out what it means to encounter you, to engage you, to find you, to discover you. And may that become something more beautiful, more elegant in the days ahead. I love you and thank you for my friends in the space. I'm grateful for this community, that it gives us a free space to discover and to learn who you are and who we are together. We pray this in Christ's name. Amen.
Would you stand as we close this morning by singing together? Come out of sadness from wherever you've been. Come broken heart, let a rescue begin. Come find your mercy, a sinner come near. Earth has no sorrow that heaven can heal. Earth has no sorrow that heaven can heal. So lay down your burden, lay down your shame. All who are broken, lift up your face. Oh, wanderer, come home. You're not too far. So lay down your hurt, lay down your heart. Come as you are. There's hope for the hopeless and all those who strayed. Come sit at the table, come taste the grace. There's a rest for the weary, rest that endures. Earth has no sorrow that heaven can cure. So lay down your burdens, lay down your shame. All who are broken, lift up your face. Oh, wanderer, come home. You're not too far. Lay down your hurt, lay down your heart. Come as you are, come as you are. Fall in His arms. Come as you are. There's joy for the morning. Sinner, be still. Earth has no sorrow that heaven can heal. 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 Lay down your burden, lay down your shame. this again. Lay down your burdens. So lay down your burdens. Lay down your shame. And all of our broken. Lift up your face. Oh, wanderer, come home. You're not too far. Lay down your heart. Lay down your heart. Come as you are. Come as you are. Come as you are. Oh, come as you are. As we go from this place today, I want you to remember that your openness and your ability to be close to the divine creation is available. As Scott was talking about the molecular matter in the petri dish, it's just this reminder that we are made up of the divine, this mystery, this energy. It is essence, and it's in all of us. And so if it's hard to believe that, if it's hard to remember it, take a pause, take a breath. Allow that to be true in your life. And then from there, remember that that's true for everyone around you as well. The people who are different than you, the people who think differently, who believe differently than you, they all have that divine spark in them as well. So let that be a place where we can join together, love one another, and be good neighbors. Thank you so much for being here today. I hope you have a great Sunday, and we will see you next week. I couldn't help but ask for you to say it all again. And I tried to write it down, but I could never find a pen. And I give anything to hear you say it one more time. The universe was made just to be seen.